and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Noah, and I wanted to welcome all of you guys to another video in this string of videos here on my YouTube channel where I take a look at lifestyles with different income levels. If you happen to be new to these videos here on my YouTube channel, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you can take something away from them. With that being said, let's get into this episode of Life with $80,000. Okay, so here we are back in Excel for this example. Like I said, this episode is going to be centered around the salary of $80,000 and basically what we can or can't do with it, right? So I'm not going to go too much in detail on how the dashboard that we're kind of looking at right now works. You guys have seen it so many times at this point that I hope you can kind of have a decent understanding of what's going on. But like I said, $80,000 is our target salary for this example. And that would lead our check, our annual or our bi-monthly checks to be just over $3,000. For this first scenario, as I always say, is the individual who's hyper-focused on investing, right? So they're all in on their employee benefits, maxing out their 401k, maxing out their HSA account, which if you don't know, is an extremely powerful account. So if your employer does offer it, I would highly recommend taking a look into it. And they also have, insurance, health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, and so on. So this individual is clearly all in on ensuring that their finances are in check, and they also have benefits and so on. So the deductions that they're going to see from the $3,076 are $884 for the 401k, $80 for health insurance, $5 for dental, $70 for vision, $160 for their HSA account, which leads their taxes per check to be $441. Now, if you are curious where I got the numbers for the health insurance and the 401k and HSA and so on, essentially these are somewhat my numbers, right? So the 401k basically is the maximum that a employee can contribute on an annual basis. Same with the HSA account. And then the benefit amount, pardon me, $80, $50, and $70. Those are all what I see at the company that I work for right now. So after all of those deductions, we are left with $1,435 per check. Monthly, that's going to be roughly $3,109. And our take home annually, of course, is going to be $37,310. So I think we've come quite a long way. We started this series with a salary of $40,000, and we're essentially doubled it right now. And if you guys have seen the earlier episodes or earlier videos for this string of videos on my YouTube channel here, with $40,000, nothing else could be done, right? You literally had maybe $5,000 take home at the end of all of your deductions and so on. But we've come a long way. We have $37,000 after maxing our 401k, making sure that we have benefits, maxing out our HSA account to play with. That is quite a lot of money, honestly. So let's see what kind of life this individual could live, assuming that they have, all of these maximum contributions to their benefits. So I kept everything consistent as we always do. Rent at $1,000, electricity charges at $80, utility at $40, groceries $400, vehicle $300, gasoline $100. They do not have a child in this example. They are also very healthy, right? They don't have any kind of medical expenses that pop up. Their pet fee per month is $15, and then they don't have student loans as well, right? So they're doing pretty well in that department. They don't have any other personal debt, which is really good. And then their bill for their cellular device, their phone, is $30 a month, which is actually pretty reasonable as well. So those make up all of our essential expenses, which total $24,180. And this is kind of what I've used for all of these episodes here to kind of keep everything consistent. So if we take our take home of $37,000 and then subtract the $24,000 from it, we're left with $13,130. So that basically means is, after we've invested, maxed out these accounts and put money towards our ensuring that we have insurance and so on, and then also paying for essential expenses, assuming that those are your essential expenses, we're left with $13,000. And from intuition, I can basically say that this is probably not going to be sufficient in my experience, but we can go ahead and throw the numbers in for the non-essential expenses as well and see where we're at. So boom, now we threw in the non-essential expenses that we kind of have here, which are 200 on discretionary expenses per month, 200 for entertainment, 20 for beauty, 20 for fitness, 150 for miscellaneous expenses, and then 200 for dining. Now, before I go any further, I do want to say that these are probably relatively conservative numbers here, just because I've worked with a lot of individuals and looked at a lot of different financial data and so on, and these are pretty low if depending on where you live and what you do. But if you're in a bigger city, going out and having entertainment is quite a bit more than that. But for this example, I think this should suffice. So that leads the total for non-essential expenses to be just under 9,500, now leaving our amount remaining to be $3,650. So as I kind of suspected, you can't really do too much here, right? Because if you look at it, we're not saving anything, right? There's a big zero here if it's cut off the screen, but we don't have anything saved, and we also don't have anything invested into a secondary retirement account, which is something that I like to recommend to everybody. You want to diversify your retirement account. You don't want everything in your 401k. You want to have a little bit of a mixture as far as taxable versus non-taxable and so on. But like I said, I kind of saw this coming just from experience, but this is decent, right? I think if you weren't living at home, which I wouldn't recommend in this scenario, just because if you've got student loans, if you've got a more expensive vehicle payment, or if your discretionary expenses are higher, you're not going to save anything, right? You might actually be pulling into from your previous savings account, lowering your total amount in savings. So for this example, I don't think it's wise to be out on your own quite yet. We're getting close, and I can definitely tell that we're getting there. But if you're trying to maximize your benefits here, it's probably not the best option to go out and take on the world of expenses on your own. Before I move forward, I want to touch on something that someone reached out to me about, that they had a sort of question regarding some of the things that I'm going over on the dashboard here. And their question basically was, you're talking about a 401k, maxing a 401k. Well, what does that mean, right? What does that mean for retirement? And I took a very rudimentary, very simple example here, basically stating that if you start using this calculator on calculator.net, there's a lot of good tools on this site here. I will link the link for this in the description of the video if you want to play with any of these for yourself. But basically, the gist of it is that if you start with $0 and you invest $1,760, which comes out to be the current 2024 maximum, basically 401k for an employee per month, and you let it sit basically in an account for 30 years at 8% interest, which is relatively conservative if you have everything invested into a decent, if you have it invested into decent investments at the end of that 30-year period. So if you start this at maybe 25, so you're 55 years old, you're going to have almost $2,500,000 in that account, which is very good, right? This is very good. So this is basically what I mean when I say maximizing a 401k, is basically being on this track here, which is a very, very, very solid track to be on for your personal retirement. Okay, so back to Excel we go. So now this is the second example, right? So this is the individual who wants to just take home their money, right? They don't care about the benefits. They don't care about their 401k or anything like that. They're making $80,000 pre-tax. They want to take home as much as they can. So the setup is exactly the same, right? Their essential expenses come out to be $24,180. And then, we obviously have a little bit of money left over because their total take home annually in this example is $60,502, which when you compare the two, that's quite a bit that they're losing out in taxes in my personal opinion. But to each their own. This is an example that I think is important to go over. So they have their essential expenses, assuming that these are, aligned with their lifestyle and so on. leaving the 33,000, of course, and then after we deduct the non-essential expenses, so they're fun, we're still left with 26,842. So again, it's pretty easy to look at that and say, oh, that's perfect, right? I can save $13,000. Put that here, and then I can put 13,000 into a separate investing account, and that's a pretty good deal. And I think on the surface it would seem like that's the case, but there's actually a couple things, of course, that I like to kind of pick apart when going over these examples. The first things, of course, is not having the benefits, right? Not having the free money that you can get if your employer offers a 401k match. So that's kind of a red flag there. And of course, the big one is not having health insurance. We get hurt, right? Things happen, shit happens, and there's nothing we can do about it. Not having health insurance is a pretty big risk. So depending on what happens, this 26,000 could easily deplete, as I always say. They're also not taking advantage of a health savings account, which is really good to put money away for different medical expenses that come up, and you can pay for them basically tax-free. The other thing that's important to note here that I always like to mention is that these expenses, essential expenses and non-essential, for example, are both relatively conservative in my personal opinion. I didn't want to make them too high because I didn't want it to be I didn't want to scare too many people off necessarily, but your rent could easily be more than $1,000 here. So let's play around with some of the numbers here to see if this $26,000 is a realistic assumption for how much money we're actually going to be left with at the end of the year. So let's say, it's maybe $1,400, something like that. Okay. So it's down a bit. That's changed things up a little bit too. Groceries, $400 a week, $100 a week, to be honest, is, depending on where you live, I think this is probably closer to $500 for a lot of people. I know it's not going to make too big of a difference, but that's kind of the case. Vehicle, $300, I think, is really low. I think the average, as I've mentioned in previous videos, is like 500-ish. So let's maybe put that in there or let's do this actually. Let's do 400. I think 400 is pretty fair here. Gasoline we'll just keep at 150. We're going to assume that they don't have a child because that will completely mess up the finances here. That's a series for a different day. It's assuming they don't have, or let's say that something comes up, right? Maybe it's, I don't know, average of $20 a month for miscellaneous things. So $240 on the year. Maybe it's just something small, like maybe a cavity or something. Although without insurance, filling a cavity is maybe far more expensive than that. And let's also say they have student loans, right? Let's say their student loans are, I don't know, maybe $200 a month, something like that. And just after that, right? Just after adjusting their essentials to something that might be a little bit more realistic, now we're left with 17,000, right? So that, it made a very significant impact on the amount of money that's going to be left over. And if we move into non-essentials and adjust to a more realistic outlook, things are going to change even more. So let's do that. Maybe discretionary $200 a month, I think it's decent. Entertainment, people like to have fun, right? Especially if you're in a bigger city. $200 a month is pretty much nothing. That can be one dinner. So let's maybe make this 400, right? This person wants to live a little bit. 200 on beauty, or 20 a month on beauty. 240 annually is probably pretty low. A perfect example, I'm getting a haircut, finally, right? Finally, I'm getting a haircut, and it's going to be probably maybe 85 just for one time. So I'm going to leave this just because I don't know what everybody's beauty expenses are. Obviously, they can fluctuate male to female and so on, but I'm just going to leave that. But it's important to note that this is pretty conservative here. Fitness, we're just going to leave that as well. 20 a month just for the gym membership. They don't do anything else. Miscellaneous expenses, maybe we bump that to 250 just because, things are bound to go wrong and so on. Dining, this is another example where 200 a month seems relatively low to me just because living in a big city, I kind of have exposure to how much different things are, how much meals are, how much takeout can add up to if you're not doing your own cooking and so on. So maybe we just double this as well. And now look, right? So now we're at 11,000, almost on the dot. So now it's a pretty stark difference from what we currently had. You were probably maybe excited to see that there was $26,000 left over, and now we're at just 11,000, right? So you could still, put a little bit of money into savings, right? You could just put all 11,000 into savings, but then of course there is absolutely no investing being done throughout the year. So where is your retirement coming from? So we're getting there, but I think in this example as well, it's just not a good idea to go out on your own. Obviously, things are subject to change here, but using these numbers, if they do resonate to you, it's probably, in my personal opinion, not a good decision to take on all of those expenses alone. So now the third and final example that we're going to go over, which is the happy medium, right? This is an individual who likes to can still contribute to their benefits in their retirement, but they also want to take something home, right? Because they want to live out on their own or whatever it may be. So of course, the 401k is kind of cut in half. So the maximum amount that we went over, right? After 30 years having two and a half million, it's not going to be there. And, that's just the reality of it, right? If you're cutting your investments in half, you're not gonna get that full amount. They do have their benefits, which is really good, and they're also contributing to their HSA account, which is also very good as well, leading their taxes per check to be $544, their take home per check to be $1,857, take home monthly just over $4,000, and then take home annually $48,000. So this is pretty good. That gives us a good starting point. So I put in all of the essential expenses, of course, right here, and we're left with $33,000 after that. Sorry, I want to make a correction. We're not left with $33,000 after our essential expenses of $24,000, and then our non-essential expenses of $9,400. We are then left with $14,622 to basically work with, right? This is our leftover money, assuming that these are what our expenses look like. So from here, you could kind of, you can take it how you will, right? We have 14,000 left over. We could put some into a secondary investment account, right? A Roth IRA, for example, which is a really good idea. And then we can save a little bit as well, because the contribution limits for a Roth IRA in 2024, for example, are $7,000. But of course, the important thing that I always come back to is these expenses here are conservative, right? So if we, change a few of these, right, let's say we do change this one to 14, maybe we change the groceries to 500, we change the vehicle to 400, and then maybe we do have student loans in this example. Now we're at 5,000, right? Just adjusting the essential expenses to a more realistic POV, $5,000. I mean, it's still a decent amount, right? So if your non-essential expenses, pardon me, are really this low, yeah, you could save $5,000 a year. You're still investing then, and you're getting a little bit of savings exposure as well. So perhaps it's something. This is a realistic example for moving out on your own and so on. But if your non-essential expenses, pardon me, or essential expenses are higher than this, right? This won't work. There won't be any money left over. You'll be burning through any kind of savings you have, and we can do that just by slightly adjusting these, right? If we just bring everything up by a little bit, maybe we make this one 200 for miscellaneous, and dining we make 300, right? We're left with like less than 1,000. So it's not that realistic in my personal opinion, just because I know how much goods and services are nowadays, especially in the bigger cities and so on. So in this specific example as well, is it possible to be out? Possibly, right? If you're sharing a lot of things and you're being very conservative, but it will definitely likely take away from your experience, day to day, right? Different trips that you might want to take. Different experiences, different leisures and luxuries that you might want. Money, you might not be reaching your savings goals, right? So, and having savings goals is equally as important as having investing goals. So there you have it. Those are the three scenarios for a salary of $80,000. Unfortunately, with this salary range, rather, I still wasn't quite convinced that you could basically live life to its fullest, by moving out and having your own expenses and so on. Of course, this is subject to change. If your expenses do happen to be very low, being out on your own, any of these examples might actually work for you. But coming from personal experience, doing a lot of data analysis on my own for different individuals, generally speaking, this salary still, for me personally, if you are in one of these different one of these three scenarios, moving out isn't going to make the most sense. So now I want to hear from the audience. Do any of these three scenarios that I've set up here resonate with you, or am I missing something? Please let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, if you are in a position where you're looking to augment your personal financial standing through financial analysis and personalized budgeting, that is exactly what I do here at AFA. If you happen to have any questions for me personally, or if you'd like to take a look at the financial services that I can provide to you, I've left my email and a link to my company website in the description box below. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for your time today, and happy financing.